Mel Gibson read a passage in the Ethiopian Bible and said it changes everything. And once you hear what it actually says, you will understand why. Your Bible has 66 books. The Ethiopian Bible has 88. The 22 they removed contain a word-for-word record of what Jesus said in the 40 days after his resurrection. A complete end-times prophecy, buried not because it was wrong, but because of who it named, what Jesus said before he left. The text is called the Book of the Covenant. It claims to record the complete teachings Jesus delivered to his disciples before his ascension. The full version of what he said in those 40 days between his resurrection and his departure. Not fragments, not parables stripped of context. A structured, deliberate, specific prophecy about the final age of the world, preserved intact by Ethiopian monks who believed these words were too important to lose and too dangerous to alter. The Western Bible gives us glimpses of those 40 days, brief appearances, a few conversations. Thomas touching the wounds, the road to Emmaus. But the Ethiopian account treats that period as the most consequential 40 days in human history. A window in which Jesus, freed from the limitations of mortal life, told his followers everything they needed to know about what was coming, not in parables, in plain language, with precision. According to the Book of the Covenant, Jesus said the final age would not begin with fire from the sky or armies at the gates of Jerusalem. It would begin with something slower, something almost invisible while it was happening. He called it the slow death of conscience, a cooling of the human spirit so gradual that most people would not feel it leaving. They would simply wake up one day and notice that something was gone. He described a generation that would know his name, but not his voice. People who would build cathedrals and fill them every week, but feel completely empty when they walked back out the door. He said the Spirit would have already left the building. The most visible signs of religious devotion, he warned, would arrive at precisely the same moment that genuine spiritual life was fading away. He warned that the false prophets of the final age would not come from distant or obvious places. They would rise from inside the church itself, speaking of heaven while building empires on earth, weaponizing his name to justify war, excuse greed, and silence the poor. They would wear holy robes and hold sacred titles, and their hands, he said, would drip with the blood of the people they claimed to serve. He said, "When you see my name used to justify war, to excuse greed, to silence the poor, know that the hour is near." Then the prophecy shifts to the physical world. Earthquakes, floods, disturbances in the sky that confuse even the wisest men. But Jesus is explicit. These are not punishments, they are signals. He calls them the birth pains of a new age. The earth itself groaning because it knows what is coming, even when the people on it have forgotten. And then the line that stops every scholar who encounters it cold. Do not fear the shaking of the ground. Fear the shaking that does not come, the stillness of hearts that have gone completely cold. The 4 ages of the end. A second Ethiopian text, the Didascalia, records a structural prophecy. Jesus lays out the final era in 4 distinct stages, each following the last with a precision that reads less like ancient mysticism and more like a sequence being described from memory. The first stage is the age of forgetting. People do not dramatically abandon the truth. They simply stop seeking it. The hunger dulls quietly. The deep questions become less urgent. Nobody announces it. One generation stops asking, and the next generation never learns there was something worth asking about. It just happens. The second stage is the age of spectacle. Noise replaces wisdom. The ability to capture attention becomes worth more than the ability to speak truth. People are surrounded by more content, more voices, and more information than any generation in history, and grow less capable of finding anything real inside it. The third stage is the age of the false shepherd. Corrupt leaders take the name of God and use it as a weapon. Religious authority becomes a machine for control. The institution that was built to point people toward heaven begins demanding instead that people look only at the institution. The shepherd eats the flock and calls it service. The fourth stage, the one that makes scholars go pale when they read it, is called the Great Silence. Not a silence of peace, not a silence of rest, a silence of the Spirit. The connection between heaven and earth grows so thin that even those who are genuinely searching can barely feel it. Prayer hits a ceiling. The presence that once felt immediate now feels like a memory that might have been a dream. And then, at the very deepest point of the great silence, Jesus says, the fire returns, not to destroy the world, to wake it up one final time, the final empire. The Didascalia records one more warning, separate from the four ages and in some ways more disturbing than all of them. Jesus warns his followers about what he calls a final empire, not a nation, not an army, a system, so vast and so subtle that most people living inside it would never realize they were captive. It would not use chains, it would use comfort, giving people bread and entertainment and calling that freedom. This empire, he says, will not announce itself. It will not march through anyone's city or demand formal allegiance. It will simply make itself so convenient, so inescapable, and so rewarding to comply with that resistance will come to feel unreasonable. The people living deepest inside it will be the ones most sincerely convinced they are free. He says its most powerful tool will not be force. It will be the managed satisfaction of desire. Enough pleasure, enough distraction, enough noise, so that the questions that would unravel the whole arrangement never get asked. The cage will be invisible, the comfort will be real, and the cost will only become clear to those who try to leave. Blessed are those who see the cage and still choose love. Blessed are those who are hungry for truth in the age of false abundance. Why these words survived. The Ethiopian Bible holds 88 books. The Western canon holds 66. The books that exist only in Ethiopia were not lost. They were kept. And understanding why requires understanding what Ethiopia actually is. In 325 AD, at the Council of Nicaea, Roman-controlled church leaders decided which texts would define Christianity for the next 2,000 years. Ethiopian scholars argue this was not neutral scholarship. It was editorial control with a specific agenda, texts that described the church itself becoming corrupt in the final age that said the most dangerous false prophets of the end times would wear crosses and build cathedrals, were far too threatening to include in a canon managed by the church, so they were excluded, and the one church that had never answered to Rome quietly kept them. Ethiopia had been Christian since the 4th century, not through conquest, not through political mandate, but through a faith that arrived naturally and held without force. Its spiritual lineage traces to Menelik I, son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The country received Christianity not as something imposed from outside, but as something it claimed had always belonged to it. Crucially, Ethiopia was never colonized. Every other African nation was eventually subjugated by a European empire. Ethiopia stood alone. At the Battle of Adwa in 1896, the Ethiopian army routed the Italian military in one of the most decisive reversals in the entire history of colonial conquest. That independence was not only political, it meant no outside authority ever had the power to tell the Ethiopian church which books were sacred and which ones had to go. Inside the monasteries of Lalibela and Aksum, monks preserved these texts in Ge'ez, an ancient written language so rarely read today that the barrier itself became a kind of unintentional protection. The words survived partly because so few people outside Ethiopia could access them. The linguistic wall that kept these texts obscure for centuries is the same wall that kept them intact. These monks did not preserve these words because they were comfortable. They preserved them because they believed they were necessary, not for their own generation, but for one that would come much later and desperately need them. The 7 seals of the heart. Before his ascension, the Ethiopian writings record Jesus giving his disciples what the texts call the 7 seals of the heart. Subscribe now, if you want to follow this series. Because what these seals describe is unlike anything recorded in the Western canon, and this is only the beginning of what the Ethiopian texts contain. These are not the cosmic seals of the Book of Revelation. They are not external events or divine judgments descending from above. They are interior states, conditions of the human soul that Jesus says will define the final generation. Not because they are extreme, but because they are ordinary, because they are everywhere. The first seal is the seal of comfort, the refusal to be disturbed by truth, the choice made quietly and repeatedly to keep things smooth and unchallenged, even when something inside you knows something is wrong. The second is the seal of pride, the conviction that your own understanding is already complete, that you have already worked out what matters, and anything that genuinely challenges that must be mistaken. The third is the seal of fear, the worship of safety above all else, the repeated decision to choose what is familiar over what is real. The fourth is the seal of distraction, the filling of every silence so the voice that might speak in that silence never gets the chance. Every notification, every scroll, every moment of stillness immediately replaced with something else. The fifth is the seal of false community, surrounding yourself only with those who confirm what you already believe, so your certainty is never tested by someone who sees things differently. The sixth is the seal of false mercy, using the reality of forgiveness as a reason to never change, telling yourself you are accepted as you are and using that as a permanent exemption from growth. And the seventh seal, the one Jesus identifies as the most dangerous, is the seal of religion itself, the use of holy words and sacred rituals to avoid the living, burning reality of God. All the appearance of devotion, none of the fire. Jesus says in the Ethiopian text, when a person breaks all, 7 seals within themselves, they are ready. They become the fire they were waiting for from the sky. The 2 harvests. The Ethiopian texts record Jesus telling his disciples that the final age will not move in one direction. 2 things will grow simultaneously, with equal force: a great darkness and a great awakening, not a gradual improvement, not a steady march toward resolution. A world violently pulled in 2 directions at once, the darkness getting darker, the light getting brighter, and the comfortable middle ground, the lukewarm space most people spend most of their lives inside, shrinking until it disappears entirely. In that day, there will be no more hiding in the gray. Every soul will be called to choose. Jesus says the people most invested in the existing system will be the least capable of seeing which harvest they belong to. The ones most certain of their righteousness will be the ones most completely captured by the darkness. The ones who know they are broken, who carry their failures without pretending otherwise, are the ones the light will find. The rapture narrative is built on the premise that the faithful will be removed, lifted out before the worst of it arrives. The Ethiopian texts describe a generation called not to escape the darkness, but to stand inside it and refuse to go out, not rescued from the fire, refined by it. He says the final battle will not be fought between armies. It will be fought inside every human heart, simultaneously, in the ordinary moments of ordinary lives, between truth and the love of comfort, between the fire of awakening and the sleep of satisfied souls. The Ethiopian monks who transcribed these words understood them as a personal charge, not a spectator event. They were not watching the end times from a distance. They believed the 2 harvests were already in motion in their own time, and that the choice between them was made not once in some dramatic moment of cosmic decision, but continuously in the 1,000 small choices of how to live each day, which voice to listen to, which hunger to feed, which silence to allow. The text says the awakening will not be announced by any institution. It will not require any authority's permission. It will simply begin in the places and the people that power has already decided do not matter. The prophecy of the final witness. The Ethiopian text scholars call the prophecy of the final witness is the one most consistently described as haunting. In it, Jesus tells his disciples that in the last days, his voice will rise from unexpected places, from deserts, from prisons, from the children of the forgotten. His spirit will speak through those ignored by the powerful. And the most dangerous truth of the end times, he says, is this: the people most confident they are ready will be the last ones to see it coming. He describes a generation of ordinary people, not famous, not powerful, not recognized by any institution, who will rise in the deepest darkness of the final days and refuse to be silent. They will be mocked, silenced, erased from the platforms and the pulpits of their age. But their voices will be heard where it counts, not in arenas, not on screens, but in the hearts of those who are ready to receive them. Do not fear if they turn off your voice. Truth does not need a microphone. Ethiopian theologians believe this prophecy was removed at Nicaea because it was too specific and too threatening. It identified the church, not the world, not some foreign enemy, but the institution of Christianity itself, as a potential vehicle for deception in the end times. It said God would bypass those institutions entirely and speak through the humble and the broken. That was not a message a church managing an empire could afford to canonize. So those words were buried, and Ethiopia kept them. The end of the lie. After all the warnings, after the 4 ages, the great silence, the false, shepherds, the two harvests. The Ethiopian texts arrive at their close with the statement, Ethiopian scholars say the Western Church most wanted to prevent people from hearing. Jesus says, the end is not the end of life, it is the end of the lie. What is coming, he says, is not destruction for its own sake. It is a burning away of everything false, a cleansing so complete that nothing which was never real can survive it, and nothing which was genuine can be lost. Those who chose love and truth, even when the whole world chose comfort and power, will not be lost. They will be known by their scars, not their crowns. Ethiopian scholars note that this closing is the most theologically radical element of the entire text. Every major religious tradition has built its end times narrative around a final judgment, a divine sorting of the worthy from the unworthy. The Ethiopian text describes something different, a world where the categories themselves collapse, where what was called sacred turns out to have been hollow, where what was dismissed as broken turns out to have been the thing most alive. The monks who preserved these words for 16 centuries did not do it because the words were comfortable. They did it because they believed a generation would come that would need them, a generation that would recognize the four ages because it was living inside the last one, that would look at the seven seals and see not ancient metaphor, but a description of its own ordinary morning. And then the texts record one final image, not a comfort, not a resolution, a question directed at every generation that would follow. The generation that makes gods of its own image, that is the generation that stands at the door. Leave a comment telling us which of the seven seals you think is most present in the world right now, and subscribe, because our next video goes inside the Book of Enoch, the Ethiopian text the early church fought hardest to remove from existence. The reason why may be more unsettling than anything in this one.